this is now becoming, kind of my favorite time of the week to talk to Hollis Hodson, my neighbor, and a candidate for Saanich Council in a couple of months. Hollis, how are you doing today? In the middle of August here.
Totally awesome. It's great.
Excellent. Oh, that's
It's
so great. You know,
learning so much, meeting so many people. It's actually incredible. There are people out there that have a wealth of knowledge about what Saanich looked like, some of them like 70 years ago, 80 years ago. And they're,
Hollis, you're actively on the doorsteps, which is extraordinary. Uh, and we've decided to do a 2 to 3 minute summary of the kind of issues that have come up from the doors before we get deeper into your policy policy positions. So what happened this last week? Lots of stuff about fires, I guess, lots of stuff about weather. You tell us.
um, Most of the people that I spoke with this week were really advocates for our environment, worried about climate change, wonder what we're doing. Also, like, I don't think I knock on many doors where I don't get an earful about the bike lanes, and it's not positive. And I know, so I'm not bringing that up because I've also had some really engaging conversations with people, responsible dog owners, where they are, what they're doing, had some really positive conversations with them around that. So that's been good, which kind of piggybacks us always back to the environment. So those have been the kind of really recurring themes. And then a lot of people will talk once they get going. They'll start to think and go, oh, right. And that affordability housing, the density, what's happening with that? What is Bill 44? What does it mean?
So Hollis, what's really fascinating about all this, and from my end, I'm looking at what you're hearing and what's trending, and what are voters saying, not what are candidates saying, what are voters saying, and really, that's I hate to say it, but that's a little bit unusual. Like, that here's a candidate for office listening to what the voters are telling them. And look at the trend here. Bike lanes, dogs leashes. That leads me to think here, and I'll be curious about your reaction. These are hyper local. Sometimes we can get too far ahead of the ball game. Like today, we're going to talk about the environment, and a big thing about environment policy is people get frustrated. What can I do? What can I do to change? And they go, well, nothing. People want to. Doesn't it seem that way? What is your opinion on this?
Well, I have experience, so I have an opinion on it. But I think in Saanich, we're a unique group of people. When you ask people, what do you love about Saanich? They're not starting to talk about buildings. They're talking about their green spaces, their parks, their beaches, where they go to do their living. That's what people care about. That's why we have so many amazing groups that from pulling together to, just a local community association or a neighborhood group that get out and they do things for their environment. Those same groups often come out and say we're a little bit challenged by some of the things that Saanich might be doing. A lot of discussions and people bring it up, and I'm fascinated. It happened to be a thought I had, but I didn't realize that others were like really on about this. Is, when you're doing these, let's go out on a limb and say over engineering of bike lanes and boulevards and all the rest, and spending all that money that is ours, and we start planting things that aren't watered, require water. Let's just start with require water. Instead of making them maybe like rock that allows the filtration and have that part go down and not be part of the road, which, by the way, Mother Nature then gets an opportunity to do its own work. That kind of thing people are aware about, and I really like it. Like sometimes I knock on the doors and they go, and then they just build these monster houses and it's just a cement pad and there's no trees and
So
there's
if I could
nothing
intervene,
left.
so summarizing, the voters, they are hyper concerned about the way that their spaces around them are being used, i.e. bike lanes,
Yes.
i.e. in the parks with the dogs, i.e. with the water. Well, this is fascinating, Hollis. This is a great segue for us because today we're going to talk about these areas around us and how we're treating these areas. That's called environmental policy. There's not much we can do, I take it. You can correct me around climate change.
There's lots.
I mean, big climate change, but I want to hear your opinion on that. But it's important that we should make sure somebody going through this video gets that Hollis Hodson, experienced candidate for Saanich Council, is listening and hearing what is important to the voters. And you will do that until election day and past. Tell me about your environmental policy, Hollis.
I do want to just make one subtle point, which is when we're speaking about green spaces and what we're doing, there are two sides to this coin, and one is the environment and one is climate change. And it's not to say they're mutually exclusive, but they are two different pieces, right? When we protect our environment, we might end up with some things that we do that help us mitigate climate change. But climate change is happening to us regardless of what we're doing with the environment. And an example of that would be if we plant only Indigenous trees here today, is that actually going to be trees that can make it in the long run if our climate changes? Environment's really important to me. Our wetlands are extremely important. We need to value them. And wetlands, for people that don't know, are very rich biodiverse areas. Often we would call them marshes if you were just using, but we have we have a lot in Saanich. We have three large ones that people generally know about. Swan Lake, which has water all year round, a lot of restoration happening there. And we have Panama Flats. I have never in my life seen Panama Flats and the little pond that's down there not have any water in it at like so early this year. It's pretty frightening. And the other one is Rithit's Bog, right? So Rithit's Bog is a bog, marsh, Swan Lake, you get involved that. So these are areas that are really important for us to protect and make sure that they're maintained. They have ecosystems that are really, really important that maintain wildlife creatures, insects, fauna, flora, river systems like the Colquitts River. You know, there are salmon in there. There are counts done on fish. All of Mother Nature knows what it's doing. It's already doing all the work. And sometimes we just need to leave it alone or help it along. So where there's invasive species, help to remove them. I really think there's an opportunity for us to follow what a lot of the elders and Indigenous know, which is they were doing a great job working with nature and the environment, and we can learn a lot from them and work with them to preserve spaces. I went and got certified in wetlands. I walked around with hydrologists with deep education. Patrick Lucy was fantastic. Got together with some other people and we started up a coalition for wetlands to look after various ones like Todd Creek. There's a lot in our area. I could go on endlessly on that. But what I really wanted to say is that we need to protect these spaces because these spaces are doing work for us. If we start developing over floodplains, we end up with what you see over in Richmond and Langley. You know, that was a lake, that was a floodplain, they reclaimed it. You're right, it's absolutely true. Great area to grow and build homes, but Mother Nature will win in the end, you know, and there was a lot of flooding and a lot of tragedy around that. And we need to learn from the lessons of other areas how to protect. So
Hollis, is this council, this current council, let's identify as opposed to what we shouldn't do, as opposed to what you would do versus the current council. What is it they're doing that does not align with your environmental policy?
Well, they've decreased their environmental department, so we need to bring that back. We need to look at some kind of enhanced environmental protection. There does need to be environmental protection in place for our parks, for our lands, for our green
That
spaces.
should be stronger than it is now.
100%. And
Okay.
actually, recently I was looking at some information, and it's interesting that we have like this abundance of green spaces and opportunities, and yet we're one of the lower funders of that. And and I think it was 2021, I want to say, latter stages, that we Saanich signed on to a climate accord, and I just don't know if they're following that. I would want to look at what they're doing now, and I would want to enhance it. They have started what's called an asset management aspect for, the intention is to catalog all of the natural assets, not just the like infrastructure assets. I have some familiarity with asset management and what that takes. That's going to be an interesting piece and a big lift, depending on how they collect the metadata for the assets and what they're doing. So I would want to see that, because then we would know. But right now, one of the things that I struggle with is the preservation of data, historical data that Saanich has around environmental pieces. So for example, they have an urban forest strategy, but they're using their numbers, I think, are coming from like mid to like 2019, mid in there. But there were people from Saanich, when they had a larger environmental department, that were coming out in 2011 and raising the flag on the tree canopy is starting to disappear, and it's going to be a problem for all of us. It's very, very important to have that shade from the tree canopy and hang on to our trees. Okay. So here we are, all these. So we need to enhance those, and we need to put teeth behind them. And I don't think that that's happening right now. They're very soft policies, and they need to have more teeth.
So there was a significantly, probably the number one community response issue over the last couple of years was narrowing Mackenzie Avenue to include bus lanes. And that was soundly defeated. And on the surface of that issue, that's a climate change issue, like get people out of cars into buses. Yeah. You seem to also be balancing off some very sort of larger climate change impacts with what's important to the community. Am I hearing that, or am I summarizing that?
Yeah, somewhat. I think of it as anything that we do to support and protect the environment is going to assist climate change. So if you have strong climate change environmental policies, then you're going to reduce the impact on climate change. But if what you're doing isn't aligned with that, or you don't fund this as well as it should, then it becomes a lower and lower priority. It needs to be a higher priority. So something like Mackenzie that you mentioned, right, where we're going to do that, and we're seeing it everywhere, by the way. It's a little, it's backwards, because if you are making the assumption that people are getting out of their cars, and they're not, they tell me, like, not getting out of my car no matter what they do. It seems like it's a war against cars. So let's park that, but then visit. What does that actually do? It means people are sitting in their cars longer, idling, which is like the worst for putting that out into the environment. I also, there are still a lot of people burning like wood or coal as their main part of heating. Those things affect climate change. You know, really, we have to make it, again, affordable and support people to get to where they need to go with what they have. And the reality is, not everybody can afford electric vehicles. We keep hearing they're going to get cheaper, but there, you know, there's a barrier there to getting people into electric vehicles that would not contribute as much. There's a lot of conversations around that. But
so what I'm hearing from you is that more emphasis, more a consequence of not abiding to a environmentally friendly social policy, yet at the same time we do require public input. You need to hear from people what's important to them, and you will balance off and eventually try to always have that as a variable in your decision making. And what I think is annoying people, and I could be wrong, I am not knocking on doors, is that some political representatives have environment as the only variable in their policy making decision. And I do not think that that's what Saanich residents want.
Yeah, well, again, it comes down to what we see out of Saanich is competing priorities. The narrative is you can have one, but you can't have both. And I would argue that's not true. If we're being responsible about what we're doing, we can factor in both, and we can do it actually quite easily. A very simple one would be to say, when you apply for a permit to build a new home, a new building, anything, you must have X amount of permeable surfaces, surfaces that do not have cement. So paving stones, rocks, whatever it is, ground that allows the water to go into the ground. It's like very simple, but you could do this across Saanich and more and just make that part of the policy. It's not an if, it's part of, you will not get a permit to build unless you tell us that you have a permeable surface around it. Because the more that you have impervious surfaces that can't be penetrated, it's simple. Where is your water going? And water is about to become a really, really big deal for all of us if we're not paying attention. And yeah. We're paying more and more for water, but there's less and less water out there for us. As they recently said, it's not a fire season. It's going to become a fire year that requires water to fight it. The rivers are low. There's not enough snow cap. All of these things are climate happening to us, the climate change affecting us, that warming, that more severe storms. The ecosystem is related. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to do this one thing over here. You have to actually look at it as a living, breathing, complete piece. If your trees, if you take trees down, the trees that are left fall over. Like we need to be looking at this, and Saanich doesn't. They should have more environmental policies and more money being spent on the environment. They should come up to where the other municipalities are. I think it's a priority for constituents from what I'm hearing when I'm knocking on the doors, which is fascinating because if I'm hearing that 3 out of 4 times, which is about what it is, bike lanes take the 100%, environment's coming in at a close 70%. That's where we need to be putting some muscle behind it, right? And that means something else is going to go, and that might be okay.
Thank you, Hollis. I think this is great for all of you. Let me take a look here. Oh, billion. We're at 1 billion, Hollis. Viewership. And next week we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to review how your door knocking conversations went, and we will attack another of your policy positions. Thank you, Hollis.
Thanks, John.
Okay, bye-bye.